while Bernie Sanders is refusing to call for a ceasefire, you have the Bernie Sanders coalition calling out the Biden administration. It seems like this is one of the issues. They're like, nah, man. Nah, we're not sitting back silent, which is good and bad because you're in the same position as Bernie Sanders where, yeah, now they're talking up a lot more than Bernie Sanders. You voted for this. You can't start the ball rolling at the top of a hill and then when it gets going and you can't stop it, now you want to be like ceasefire. But let's listen to the NATO left. And so if you haven't been listening to some of the NATO left, that's TYT, that's the Humanist Report, that's Rational National, that's Majority Report. There's been varying levels of support for Palestinians. And of course, the squad is giving them cover. They're giving them the green light that they can go hard at this because the squad is apparently doing more than they would usually do. But let's listen to Anna and TYT here.
Biden's unwavering support toward Israel's brutal siege of Gaza has had a pretty massive impact on his support among Arab Americans, which is something incredibly concerning for a president who just barely won in the swing states. Now, a poll by the Arab American Institute shows that now just 23% of Arab Americans identify as Democrats due to Biden's handling of this war. Now, this is the first time a majority reported that they do not support Democrats since the Institute began tracking party identification in 1996. Now, don't get it twisted. They definitely do not side with the GOP either. Those identifying as independents rose to 31%, the highest it's ever been. And there are good reasons for why they just don't want to be identified as Democrats anymore. Look, we're not silly. We know that we know what Trump has done to our communities, says Amir Zar, the president of the Dearborn-based New Generation for Palestine. But when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he continues, the policies are basically the same, except when Trump does it, you get some pushback from the Democratic Party. You know, because the partisan squabbles are way more important than doing the right thing. If Trump wants to do something, Democrats have an issue with it. But then they'll turn around and do the same thing when they're in power. It's pretty gross. And Arab Americans are realizing that now. Now, making matters worse for Biden in his quest for electoral victory is this. The same poll found that only 17% of Arab American voters say they will vote for Biden in 2024. A staggering drop from 59% in 2020. Now look, Biden obviously needs to win states like Michigan in order to be the victor of the general election. But things are not looking good because of the fact that there's a massive Arab.
There is a big Arab population in Michigan. She's speaking to the point I made earlier about why the Democrats have made this pivot. They clearly didn't understand or underestimated the support that their voting constituency has or had for the Palestinian plight. They clearly underestimated that. They went hard at Israel, thinking their Democratic voters and constituency would follow them along right behind them. Everybody, just like the Ukraine, just like they all fell in line in Ukraine. And that's just not what's happening. That's not what's happening. And they're writing article that's getting out in corporate media. And I read one yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, The Nation. All these days kind of run together for me, or at least the episode. So, but let's go back to Anna, and then I'm going to go to a Humanist Report just to show you how all of them are kind of going at Joe Biden.
Arab population residing in Michigan. The poll results are likely to increase concerns among Democrats about Biden's standing with Arab Americans heading into 2024, particularly in Michigan, where roughly 277,000 Arab Americans call home, and Biden won in 2020 by just 155,000 votes. So if they decide, we're gonna sit this one out, we're not gonna vote for the guy who has repeatedly justified the brutal bombardment of Gaza, which has led to thousands of innocent civilian deaths. Now, the smaller Arab population or the smaller Arab American populations in Pennsylvania and Georgia were also larger than Biden's margins of victory.
Now, I'm going to scroll back just a few seconds here. Let me play it, and then I'll say what I want to say.
55,000 votes. So if they decide, we're gonna sit this one out, we're not gonna vote for the guy who has
this description
repeatedly justified the brutal bombardment of Gaza, which has led to thousands.
The guy who's justified, this is not part of the article. This is Anna's description. And it speaks to what I was talking about. These are their voters, their most left voters who, when they said, I'm gonna veto Medicare for all, they stayed. When they said, I'm gonna give you student debt relief and they didn't get it, they stayed. When they watched as the federal right to an abortion was taken away, they stayed. But this Palestinian thing, they're like, I don't know about this one here. And some is varying levels of pushback. TYT, as far as in rhetoric, I would say their words have been a lot more forceful than some of the other ones on the NATO left, along with the Humanist Report. Their words have been a lot more forceful as far as pushback wise, but maybe Majority Report might have been the lightest, but let's continue.
Of innocent civilian deaths. Now, the smaller Arab population or the smaller Arab American populations in Pennsylvania and Georgia were also larger than Biden's margins of victory there. All three states are ones Biden flipped after Trump won them in 2016. And remember, Biden's very likely to go up against Trump again. And if he needs to rely on those Arab American votes in order to win the election, things are not looking good for him. And look, it is not just Arabs who are now speaking out against Joe Biden. Zogby, a decades-long member of the Democratic National Committee, notes that the shift away from the Democratic Party among Arab Americans can be seen across the board. Among the old and the young, the naturalized citizens and the native-born Americans, as well as among Catholics, Orthodox Christians, and Muslims. The community is feeling a certain sense of cohesion, and Joe Biden and Israel brought them together, he says. Additionally, a Data for Progress poll found that 66% of Americans support a ceasefire in Gaza because Americans are good people. And our government, unfortunately, increasingly is not representative of what we want. And I really hope that the global community understands that, because as you see press conference after press conference featuring, various State Department officials providing cover for Israel's brutality, I don't want anyone to make the mistake in the global community that the United States consists of a giant population of people, the majority of whom are in favor of ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip. We are not. Again, 66% want a ceasefire. And it's important to also note that conflating these Americans with anyone who has made justifications for Hamas and its brutal and disgusting terrorist attacks is a liar. Two things can be true. You can be against what Hamas did, as I am, as many people in the United States happen to be, while also seeing what the IDF is doing in the Gaza Strip and standing against that as well. That's where I'm at.